York subway smells of something that is hard to remember but impossible to forget. Damp concrete, machine oil, and a draft that comes from nowhere. By day, this smell is drowned in the crowd, in guitar-playing buskers, in the familiar "stand clear of the closing doors, please." At night, it becomes the voice of the place. I came to 14 St. Union Square just after midnight. Above ground, storefronts cooling down, taxis flashing their headlights less often. Below ground, empty benches, the yellow safety edge, black tunnel stripes. On the electronic display, familiar numbers, but they seemed unreliable, as if invented for those who never look at the rails. I needed to go to Brooklyn. I was used to riding along Lexington Ave and changing trains without even looking at the map. Those who travel at night rarely check it. The body remembers the rhythm of braking and that sudden jerk when the doors stubbornly slam shut if you're too slow. First, I heard a train I couldn't yet see. A heavy rumble deep in the ground, a resonance that made the railing tremble. But the train slid into the station almost silently. It looked older than the others, the same shape, but the metal at the joints had darkened, and the lamps above the doors flickered as if they were shivering. The doors opened as if making way for the air. I stepped inside. The car was nearly empty. A man slept on a distant seat, his hand covering half his face, and someone was typing on a phone without looking up. The light was steady, without the usual greenish tint, whiter than it ought to be underground. We started moving. The platform, the mosaics, the ads, all slid beyond the glass, stretched into lines, and vanished. I stared at the cables running along the walls, sometimes converging, sometimes pulling apart, like the map lines when you try to follow the red one, but your eyes slip to the blue. At Canal Street, the train didn't stop. I instinctively rose, picking the right side for the doors, but the train only sped up, and the station, with its familiar tile and white columns, slid by like a shadow. Next should logically have been Brooklyn Bridge, City Hall, and near there the old City Hall, sealed off like a display behind glass. But a minute later, an unfamiliar platform filled the window. There were no signs. The lamps buzzed low, and one swayed as if someone had just brushed past it. The girl with the phone noticed that something was wrong. She lifted her eyes, looked at me as if about to say something, and suddenly stood up. She quickly walked to the door and went into the next car. The door closed behind her with a dull thud. Her bag remained on the seat. I rose, meaning to call after her, but the man in the corner lifted his head. His face was half hidden by his hand. In a hoarse voice, he said, "Don't get up, you can't leave here." I froze. The car shuddered, the lights flickered, went dark for a couple of seconds. When the lamps lit up again, the man was gone. Only the dented seat remained, as if he had just stood up. Now I was alone. Only the girl's bag on the seat reminded me someone had been here moments ago. Suddenly, a metallic scraping rose from the floor. At first faint, as if someone were dragging a fingernail across the steel. Then louder, more insistent. The sound stretched directly under my seat. I jerked my legs up. The scraping stopped. But a moment later, it sounded above, in the ceiling. The panels trembled faintly. The metal bars rattled with a thin vibration. It felt like something was crawling above the lamps, mirroring my every movement. I held my breath, trying not to move. The train slid through the dark tunnel, and besides that sound, there was nothing. The train slowed and stopped. The doors opened without the usual announcement. Beyond them lay a station, blanketed in dust. The floor was cracked. Posters on the walls were peeling and faded. The lamps barely shone, buzzing with a low electric hum. I stepped out. The doors closed immediately, and the train slipped into the darkness, leaving me alone. Along the wall hung a subway map. At first it looked ordinary, but the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt. The lines ran strangely, intersecting where they shouldn't. The stations were named almost correctly, but warped. Brulken, Canla, Hoyt, Skirmerhorn. In the center of the map, a red dot glowed. "You are here." Beside it was the name, Lower 13. I froze. Such a station didn't exist in New York, never had. I pulled out my phone. No service. The clock read Oro 3 Gower and refused to move. I walked toward the escalator. Its steps were frozen, rusted, and the sign above read, "Out of service." I climbed to the top and met a gate. Behind it stretched a dark corridor. From there came the sound of water and rare muffled bangs, as if something below was being shut. I heard a train approaching. First, a dull noise, then light in the tunnel. But the train that appeared was unlike any other. The cars had no windows at all. The metal looked as if it had been pulled from fire. Dull, uneven, almost melted. The doors opened on their own. Inside poured a steady white light, too bright and cold for the subway. It didn't flicker, didn't cast shadows. I stepped back. My heart pounded as if the car itself were pulling me inside. Behind me, as if from the air, came a familiar voice, the man from the earlier car. There's always only one exit, but you won't want to find it. I slowly stepped forward and entered. Inside, there were no seats, no poles, no ads. Only smooth walls and a single door at the end labeled Emergency Egress. I reached out my hand. The door yielded as if the air itself pulled my palm inward. At that moment, the train jolted and smoothly rolled on into the darkness. Where the windows should have been, something else appeared. To the left stretched a narrow corridor lined with metal doors. Each had a grate and codes of letters and numbers. From some of the grates, cold air hissed out. On the right opened a vast hall with galleries and wrought iron railings. At the far end hung a clock without hands. Now and then dust sifted down from it, as if someone inside was moving it. An announcement voice sounded suddenly. "Stand clear of the closing doors, please." But instead of the last word, I distinctly heard my own name. I froze. It felt as if the sound had entered not my ears, but my mind. The phone in my hand lit up. The screen showed the time, 03:00 hour. In the audio folder, a new file appeared. Subway, 300 WAV length, 0.0. I pressed play. Static hissed, then 3 metallic strikes like a knife dragged across a radiator. The recording ended, but its length had changed to 0.1. The train kept moving, slow and steady. The walls of the corridors moved with it. I realized the trap here wasn't fear. The trap was that everything looked too familiar, as if it had always existed. At that moment, the door labeled Emergency Egress opened slightly. From the crack drifted the scent of the street. Rain, coffee, urban ozone. I stepped through without hesitation. The corridor beyond the door was strange. It ran at a slant, seemingly straight, yet my legs felt a climb. The walls were not tiled, but made of a porous gray material, like compressed dust. Every few steps came metal doors with round handles. Some bore green reflective signs, others white squares with numbers like dormitory doors. From one keyhole I heard faint movement, as if someone passed with a bag brushing the wall. I didn't open it. Above hung a sign, "Exit to Street." Beneath it, an arrow pointed upward, but ahead was only a smooth wall. I touched it with my palm. It vibrated like an elevator shaft. I walked for a long time. The corridor brought me to a station. It was Union Square again, but different. The tile was the same, but the ads were old. Slogans and fonts of another era. The columns were darkened. The light fell differently. The clock read 030. Scratched into the corner of the wall were the letters L13. A real train rumbled on the rails, the N line. People got on and off, everything looked normal. But in the windows, the reflection wasn't this station. It was the white car of lower 13, and my reflection was walking toward me.
The display blinked. Next train, 3 a.m.